Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from in the world. From what I've seen in the news, you're either in a snowstorm or a windstorm, unless you're coming from Australia. That seems to be what's going on around the world. So I hope you all are warm and safe. Thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon. Welcome to our final webinar for this week for the EA Jumpstart 2025 series. My name is Ashima, and I'm delighted to be your host today during today's session titled Turning Strategy into Results with Seamless Execution. So before we get started, I am going to do some webinar housekeeping. We are recording today's session, and we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. If you look at the bottom of your application, there's some buttons, and there is a Q&A button in the webinar app. So we have Q&A chat moderators behind the scenes who are ready to answer any questions you throw into chat. We will also have a live Q&A with our speaker at the end of the webinar today. We'll also be launching a few polls during today's session, so please do not be shy. We're going to actually start with understanding who you are and what's the audience we're speaking to. So if we can launch the poll on, what's your position as it relates to enterprise architecture? Are you an EA, a solutions architect? Are you an IT? We would love to know who we're speaking to so we can sort of cater the conversation and make sure we're inclusive if we see a big group showing up today. So we're seeing the live stream of the poll. It's mostly enterprise architects. So Jason, you are in your own company. I see some solutions architects here, IT managers, business analysts. Yeah, so we've got a mix of everyone, which is great. So we will be doing some polls during the session. So we would encourage you to participate in those polls. I'm just going to share the results of this poll, see if everyone can see it. And if we get a question that we can't answer here live, we'll definitely get back to you after the webinar and make sure you get the answer to your question. So don't be shy. Ask anything you like. And lastly, at the bottom of your module, you'll see a resources section, and we've uploaded resources there. So you can actually download them and you can follow up and get them from us directly if you want to email us at hello@ardoq.com. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our speaker today. So I'm excited to introduce Dr. Jason Baragry. He's a true expert in the field of enterprise architecture. He's got over 25 years of EA experience, and he's a visionary in the field. As the chief enterprise architect at Ardoq, he's not just driving our product and company innovation strategy, he's helping redefine how EAs articulate their delivery of value and bridge the gap between technology and business transformation. Jason has a really strong career, includes some pivotal roles at Sun Microsystems and Telia Norway, where he honed his ability to tackle complex strategy to execution challenges. So that's why we picked him for today's session. He's respected in the industry and has written a lot of the Ardoq out-of-box best practice solution guides and playbooks that we have available for free to our customers himself. He is one of Gartner's favorites to talk to about the industry, market trends, the vision for the future of EA. Jason has a PhD in computer science. He's originally from Australia, so he's bringing a unique global perspective to the field, and we're very excited for that. From an Ardoq perspective, I do want to say that we're really proud of our team of EAs that we have internally. They've been presenting all week and on common issues that a lot of the enterprise architects face and how they have solved them in their own careers. They have been developing solutions for Ardoq behind the scenes. They have deep knowledge and varied experience. So Jason and our internal EA team are a true part of what sets Ardoq apart. It is EAs building for EAs here. So buckle up for this great session. Really, really excited to get into it. So let's just go over the agenda very quickly. So this is what we're going to go over today. We'll confront the challenges that every EA faces. So Jason's going to share why, the strategy to execution process often breaks down and how we can overcome those hurdles with the right tools and strategy. He's going to bring these concepts to life with some compelling examples. We'll get hands-on. Jason's going to give us a live demo showing you exactly how Ardoq works in the world of strategy to execution, how it can support your efforts. And then before we wrap up, we'll cover some what success looks like, some common pitfalls to avoid, so some just general advice from Jason. And it's a jam-packed agenda. So hopefully, if you have any questions, just keep asking them throughout. And let's get started. Jason, I'm going to pass the torch over to you.
Good on you. Thanks, Ash. Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. I can tell you as an architect, I'm not used to that much razzle-dazzle at the front of a webinar. So, all right, let's see if we can keep up. We're going to talk about strategy to execution. And during this series of webinars we've done all week, a lot of they have been about, hey, how do you collect information and represent it the right way? Typical modeling work that we all do. But all of us, all architects, everyone I've ever worked with, we all want to be in strategic design, and we all want to be in that process of taking strategic ideas into reality. And that's what this solution's all about. How do we as architects, not just model it, because that's what we all kind of do at the start, right? The thing that we're really good at is taking complex problems and modeling them. But what we really want to do is take that insight, get it into how the company executes, and make sure that we as architects are delivering value, right? Our deliverables are actually used by people all the time. That's what we want to talk about. So let's talk about strategy to execution. Every webinar you go to, every deck you ever see.
I can't see any slides, so I just want to make sure we're sharing.
Yeah, we're sharing.
Okay, just making sure.
So everyone you see too starts with a whole lot of statistics from the industry, and we're no different. But what I'll try and do is start with a little bit different one. One of the statistics you get from Gartner, for the majority of companies, the way they spend their IT dollar is roughly 70-30. 70% keeping the lights on, doing the kind of change projects you need to do to maintenance, just upgrading, doing technical improvements, maybe enablers. And about 30% of the budget goes to actually delivering on business change, business value. And as these studies on the screen show, different people have shown that, well, let's say half of that quite often goes to waste for all kinds of reasons, right? And these are listed up on the screen here. It's either you don't have an owner that drives a project, not just delivering on the project, but actually making sure you get the benefits, making sure everyone has a strategy that says we're going to win everything somewhere in their company, right? So having a strategy that actually has a measurable goal that you can deliver on as a team, being able to adapt as things change. Priorities change, but projects often live forever. And many of us in the IT world, or many of us in the enterprise architecture world, we're going from this way of organizations being very plan run sort of way of thinking through a centralized command and control channel to really distributed product aligned teams where you have much more autonomy, which is great. Everyone can drive their own process, get to market faster, but often you lack that alignment across. So there's all sorts of reasons why it happens. And what we do is when we start looking at a solution, we think, okay, for the architects that we want to support, and then for the people that those architects need to support, what are the questions they're trying to answer? And whenever we're working with organizations, working with our customers, whenever they tackle any of our solutions, we always start with, well, what questions are you trying to answer? Because we meet far too many organizations, far too many architecture teams whose goal seems to be to do architecture, which doesn't really help the organization, right? And it's why we often have this problem with architecture teams not delivering as they should and struggling to get the engagement. So always start with, what are the questions you're trying to answer? To give you an example, right? I think about this time last year, Something was going on in the industry. Our CEO said, okay, this is a trigger moment. This is a real chance for us to exploit this opportunity, get something new to market and counter this threat or exploit this opportunity we have. And we're a medium-sized company. So the first set of questions was, okay, what are the different ideas that we could exploit? And for each of those ideas, who would need to be involved in order to deliver on them? And what kind of effort would need to be there? And how long would it take? And for each of those people, what teams are they part of? And what are the other projects they're working on? And what are the objectives connected to those projects? Because it's not just about, hey, I've got a great idea, let's shift in that direction. It's about the consequences, right? So for that executive team talking to us as architects, it was very much, how can we quickly answer these questions to move at the speed we want to as a company, using the information that you have in your architecture repository without having to do a 3-month pre-project analysis of how we do things? And that's what we're trying to get to with these solutions. How do we help your large company move like a small company who's able to make those decisions as quickly as possible? And when you do that, you see this is the kind of information you want to be able to get quick access to. So what do we want to do and why? How is that going to impact the business? Whether that's connected to business capabilities or processes or informations or value streams, however you choose to represent your business architecture. How is the objectives requiring a change in that business function? And then what is the IT through which that business executes? So what are the impact in IT that would need to happen? And then who are the people connected to that? And what kind of change would need to happen, and what kind of project? Does the business need to change? Does the process need to change? Do the development teams, what are they also working on? So we need to get this information front and center as quickly and as easy as possible for different types of objectives. Now, this kind of slide you'll see in any slide deck from any vendor or any consulting company. So the issue is often not how do you represent this bit of information, but how do you do it at scale? Because people have, many tens of objectives, strategies that they could be working on at once. You can have many tens of organizational units, large business units that are executing, which break down into 100 different individual teams. You might have in your business architecture, you could have 50, 60, 100 different just individual bits of business function, however you choose to represent them. Each of those connected into different parts of IT, which have, you could have 1,000 pieces of IT that you need to understand connected to those, and then all the teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're working at that scale, that doesn't fit in anyone's head. So you need to be able to create this enterprise graph of how it all fits together. So you can say, hey, we need to impact here. Where is it connected? Where is it connected as quickly as possible? And that's what we're trying to do. It's not just how do we get examples that fit on one page like we do in a presentation like this, and unfortunately we have to give very simplified presentations for demos, of course. But when you scale up, when you're in a real world situation, does it really work? That's what we want to show you today. So that's the first thing. How do you get your information and make that information accessible at scale so people can see information through the noise? And the other major principle is, how do you get it embedded in how your company works? Because again, our goal as architects, progressive, successful architecture teams, the ones that we see, and we see a really broad spectrum, they're the ones that are fully integrated into how their business works. They're able to explain what they do in a way that fits in to what the rest of the company needs, not the other way around, not expecting other people to come and make use of their information, but create their information and make it available within the process, within the way the other parts of the business work. So we don't want you to create a strategy to execution model which sits in an EA repository collecting dust in the corner in the hope that someone will come and look at it. We want you to identify the objective and strategy process in your company. We want you to identify the IT or the project investment process in your company and how that works. And often those two separate processes interrelate. And then you should be thinking about what are all the points in those processes where people need information? What are all the stakeholders at each individual point in those processes? What are the triggers that we need as architects to say, oh, this is going on? Let's automatically generate that deliverable to these people at the time they need it. Because that's what we really should be doing, right? As architects, we need to be fully integrated into the operational processes of the company to get the kind of seat at the table for strategic design that all of us would like to have. So when you start with this, always identify the questions you want to answer. Based on those questions you want to answer, what is the representation of the information, the deliverables that you want to create at scale? How do you get those assets at scale? And how are you going to integrate into the processes of your company? They're the three kind of starting points when you want to deal with strategy to execution. So let's show how it's done. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough, going to give you a flavor of what we provide. There's lots of information all over our help system and more videos, more detailed descriptions, but hopefully this gives you a taste and where you can keep exploring. So as an overview, we create different dashboards, and these dashboards can consist of all the types of information that we've started to identify. So what are the strategy and objectives in a company? Who are the people who are responsible for them? So again, this all starts from which questions do you want to answer? And if you look back at the problems people have in order to get value from strategy to execution, to make sure they're not losing that, getting that value leakage underway, it can be things like, we must always have people who are responsible for the objectives and also delivering on the identified benefits. So where you just keeping track of those objectives, just being able to say, we know exactly who's responsible and where do we miss people? Because that simple data quality can help the people who are responsible for strategy to execution, who are often ultimately your COO or your CIO or your PMO function, help them to do their jobs with your architecture information. So strategy and objectives, breaking that down towards initiatives. What are the different projects that are running? You might have, again, a traditional Prince 2 centralized investment committee kicking off projects, or you might have distributed teams that are doing a no project type environment where each product-oriented team has its own backlog of epics and they're able to prioritize given their budget and their goals for a particular increment or quarter. And we can support both of those kinds of approaches. So objectives, breaking it down into initiatives. And for those initiatives, how is the spend going, both cost and budgets? And as we'll get into, what are the kind of benefits for the company? So I'll dig in now to how we put together that kind of information. But I'll say up front, when I've worked in different organizations and when I've been consulting and helping different organizations, everyone does it differently. Everyone does strategy and objectives differently. Everyone talks about how they do investment in projects is a bit different. So one of the benefits of Ardoq is we'll give you a starting point for how to do this, and then we'll give you help, and you can do it yourself. You can adapt our solution into the context of how you work. We're not going to force you to work the way we tell you to work. The other thing is we see different ways of going through a strategy to execution process. The way I'm going to talk about it today is very top down. Hey, we have strategies that has very direct objectives, that leads to projects, that leads to change, that leads to benefit. Some companies work like that. Other companies are very tactical. I've certainly worked in some of those as well. Very fast-paced companies, very low, especially low margin type companies with high degree of competition. Often you're just investing in projects. Everything happens at the project or initiative level. And then as part of getting that investment, you then go and identify what are the business benefits that will come. And in theory, you connect that up to goals and strategies. Although what I see in practice is people can be very creative in how they do that, but they're pushing through the project investments. So whether you're going top down or bottom up or a combination of the two, we can support you with that as well. So top down. We're looking at the objectives and key results of a company. So looking at the company as a whole, how can you get that overview? And then how can you maybe just simply dig down into a particular department? What are their objectives and key results? It's okay. I have to say, it's not particularly interesting, right? People want to look at this information when they want to make a decision. So they don't want to just see the modeled information. They want to see, when do I need to react? When do I need to make a change? When do I need to go and talk to someone? So how do you turn that into a heat map? How do you turn it into insight rather than just data? So here we're quickly heat mapping. I think this heat map is based on priority in terms of color coding. But the more interesting part, I think, is if you look at these calculated progress. What we'll get into a moment is Ardoq is built on an enterprise knowledge graph. So we build an entire graph of your organization, which includes these objectives, key results, strategies, or how you wish to represent them. And they're connected down to initiatives, which are connected down into, for example, the IT and the business architectures, which may be connected further using Jira into actual ticketing systems. And we're able to analyze that graph and pull information up. So what we're looking at here are objectives. These objectives are delivered by initiatives. Almost all the decision making, all the data that happens, the execution in a company happens at the initiative level. So we're looking at the progress of all the initiatives that deliver on this objective and then aggregating that up. Because one of the goals as architects is to take the extremely detailed information that we deal with, and how can you simplify and aggregate that up to the people who need to make decisions in a more business context? And this explains the structure underneath. So we're looking at the objectives for the entire company. They may be linked together in a kind of cascading set of objectives. So we were looking at increased sales before. Each of those links down into different types of initiatives, which I'm not showing here, but link further into kind of impacts you have. And once you have this connected graph of information, you can mix and match it in different ways. So in this case, we're looking at what are the different, I'm taking a subset, what are all the different projects in our company? And then what kind of benefit are they providing? So we're looking across the horizontal axis, we're looking at business capabilities. This could be a process map instead. And we can dig into those maps of the business architecture, and we can say, what is the business benefit that's being delivered? So again, at the PMO level, everyone has some kind of project tracking tool, and everyone can go in there to see what is happening on this project or program. But when you take a step back, when you're dealing holistically, as we often do, and we're looking at what the company is doing as a whole, not everyone can remember everything about every project. And every company I've ever been in has some kind of project phoenix going on, which the people in the project understand, and no one else in the company knows what it does. So how do you represent what is the business benefit that's going to be delivered by individual projects? So we have this concept of a capability change that will be delivered, capability delta, and then we're able to get that into the information graph as well. So then you can start to mix those things together. What are the projects? Where will the benefit be? What is the actual business benefit? And you could dig down and look at the business case that's happening on that capability change. Like any good tool, we have a timeline view, so you can look at how projects are going, but every tool has one of those. So the interesting thing is, well, let's look at that same information in a different way. Let's not look at projects and how they're going. Let's look at, say, the same set of projects, but from the point of view of IT. Because again, our goal in strategy to execution in architecture, use all our EA information in order to make better decisions. And decisions have to be made when you reprioritize or when you have conflicts that need to be resolved. Excuse me. So here we're looking at, we have a couple of different projects that are hitting this application at the same time, these two. And we could do the same mix and match from a team perspective. Where do we have multiple projects that are lined up that require the same people, right? And these are the kind of things looking at it from the IT perspective, looking at it from a capability perspective, looking at it from a team perspective, where you start to combine traditional project management information with the extra insight you can get from enterprise architecture information. Okay, and then once you go beyond those kind of timelines, I mentioned earlier that we're able to track costs. So we're able to track costs on initiatives. We're able to roll those costs up and look at those in terms of the objectives. So how much are we paying for this larger strategy we have? And you could do the same thing. What is the cost of the projects that are going to deliver the benefits for this particular part of the company? These are, again, the kind of more holistic type decisions you make once you get beyond the focus on one single project. Yeah, so here we're looking at what is the progress in the projects, what is the individual costs of those, and I think we're looking at the size of the bubble in terms of budget. So where are we spending more than we expect to make those quicker decisions? And maybe the last thing I'll show, of course, you can go into a more structural view, and you can go in our graph, you can take a starting point. So we're looking at, let's look at sales order processing as a capability. Let's look at the business benefit that we're trying to deliver. So the capability improvement, trying to automate a lot of B2B order handling. And then based on there, what is the consequence of us doing this? It has one or more projects which are trying to deliver on this. Each of those have a number of impacts in terms of different applications, which in turn may impact other applications in an integration setting, which may require changes to different processes for different parts of the organization, which in turn deliver on different strategies for the company. So what we tried to show is that we build this in order to get the view at scale. You need to have this interconnected set of information. You need to be able to drill in from different lenses and provide the kind of deliverables that help people answer questions on the fly when they need to answer those questions. Now, one thing I haven't done is show you how to get information in. So we can talk about that another time, how to do surveys with different people. I mentioned you want to get into different operational processes in your company. So there's different ways we can trigger people as this information changes with broadcasts, etc. How we send them dashboards, other types of things. They're all part of the package. But that is, if you want to dig deeper, get in touch and we'll go into that in more detail. So let's skip back to the presentation.
Great.
You want to take it, Sash?
Thanks, Jason. That was really insightful. And now we have a poll for the audience. We want to hear from you, and we'll have Jason react to some of the data that we get back. So what is the biggest obstacle in your organization as you face moving from strategy to execution? The poll should be in front of you now, and you can just quickly vote. We picked some common responses we usually get, but if there's something that you want to say that isn't listed, you could type it into the chat or the Q&A. All right, we have misalignment between business and IT goals, poor prioritization of initiatives, lack of real-time insights into progress or performance, difficulty adapting to changes in strategy or other. You can share in the chat. It seems like misalignment between business and IT is winning out, but also not too far behind is lack of real-time insights into progress or performance. Jason, do you have any thoughts on the trending topics here? Oh, Jason, you're on mute. Sorry.
It wouldn't be a webinar without forgetting to unmute. So yeah, when isn't there misalignment between business and IT? We certainly see that. And one thing we see as a big obstacle is, as often as architects, we think if we make something really cool, if we create a very good model, people will come and want to engage with it. And it's not the case, right? From years and years of experience, I wish people would come and engage more in what our architecture teams do, but they don't. So it's incumbent upon us as architects to say, how can we simplify this? How can we put it in terms that these stakeholders will understand in the context of the problem that they're trying to solve? And and then it gets used more. And I can say when you're trying to implement S2E in practice, it can be hard to get embedded in the organization. So often you want to look for an ally in your organization. And if you can work with often a CIO, often a CISO as well, because often the people who need to do one of the final approvals on an investment decision is, of course, the person who holds the IT budget or the person who is going to be responsible for the risk consequence. So if you can say, look, if let's work together, if I can generate this information as part of the strategy to execution process so that you are able to make a better quality decision about whether to invest or approve an investment, then we're going to get better quality projects. And it will, no one wants to do extra work when they're trying to do this strategy to execution process. But if it becomes mandated from the people who control the money or people who control the final security check, then they can be very good allies to use to help you get integrated and get that alignment better between business and IT.
Yeah, that's really good insights. We have some interesting chat responses too. John said, clear business strategy is absent. IT strategy has to be second guessed then. So that's another challenge people are facing.
Now,
Any
spot on. That's a real observation. Oh, man, yeah, I mean, IT enables business. Business works through IT. They're inextricably intertwined. So apart from extremely technical issues like, oh, we should improve the quality of what we're doing, or we should do a cloud migration, or we should do an infrastructure upgrade, which are purely IT decisions, almost everything else. It's the business strategy and the IT strategy. What do you want to do combined with what is possible to do that have to be developed together?
Makes sense. Well, thanks everyone for participating in our poll. We'll continue on with the presentation. Over to you.
All right. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. And when I was thinking of these examples, the first two that came to mind were customers we have in Australia because I was down there recently talking to them. So I'll just give you those examples, but they're indicative of similar customer stories we have other places. Now, the first one is a conglomerate that has many, many different types of retail brands. And those retail brands, excuse me, they're actually trying to divest or to separate one of the brands so it can move autonomously. And so the goal of the architects is to ensure that they're meeting the legal obligations to divest this organization. So it's a massive project, of course, lots of IT that needs to be replaced. And there's constant pressure from the people running the project. Do we have control over our ability to deliver on this objective that we need to get out by this time? So being able to show where is the impact going to be, in which order do we need to do things, which people need to be involved. So it's a combination of architecture information and traditional PMO information, and they're able to do that together in Ardoq. And then that way they're able to reduce the risk. People feel more confident making these investment decisions. Now, that's not the only thing they're doing, of course. So talking to their CIO, they're impacted by cost of living, same as everywhere else in the world. So they need to reduce their cost structure. So in addition to doing this divestiture, they need to do a rationalization to get down the number of applications. So they're planning that kind of project. And so how do you plan the impacts of that project together with the other one? But that's purely inside IT. And then taking a step back again, this CIO was saying, look, our organization acts as a partner with all the different business functions. Each of the different brands I mentioned has its own strategy, but they have to make use of a lot of shared infrastructure, and we have to provide that. Now, all of these business owners know that we're doing this divestiture. They know that we have to save cost, but they also have their own goals and objectives. They have their own strategies they have to deliver on. So their question is, I understand this is happening. I need you to answer me what is possible to do while that is going on, because that's not the entire IT budget. and it's not impacting the entire IT estate. So in order to answer that question, they have to be able to say, what's left over. Not just looking at timelines like you do in a project management tool, but what is not impacted. Because that lets IT then say, okay, or their architecture team say, let's work together based on what's going on and based on looking at your strategy and objectives. Here's a list of things that are actually possible in different timeframes. And now let's collaborate on how we can co-create something where we can get investment that'll help you get part of the way for those goals. So that's one example. The second example is a government services organization. This government organization actually supports 60 different types of government services. Each of those services has its own business unit, has its own strategy and objectives. And each of those government service areas goes down into individual benefits. Each of those benefits has either digital or physical services that it needs to deliver to the citizens. And each of those digital and physical services could be delivered by either internal organizations or third-party, privatized organizations, or just third-party subcontractors. So they have this incredibly complex mix of strategies connected to business areas, connected to different digital services and physical services and service providers. And like any kind of organization, they need to react to changes in legislation or policy, changes in what's happening in budget cycles, changes in what's going on with the service providers. So how can they very quickly keep an understanding of what's going on and query what's happening in that interconnected graph of information to make those decisions faster? And what they're finding by keeping track of strategy to execution in this way is, as they say, that the architects are able to move to the left. Because if you look at this, these circles from Gartner on the left there, a lot of us architects end up into the late in the phase definition of architectures for projects, or making sure those project solutions fit together in a more holistic way. So we're very much on the right-hand side. But what they're able to show is that when they are able to capture this information in strategy to execution in a good way, it enables the individual teams to have that information that they used to provide, and they are able to move earlier in the process. They are able to take part much earlier in strategic planning to be able to say, look, you have these objectives in this part of the organization. We can already see that these are the potential issues that you're going to face now, because we have that information available. When we don't have to wait till we start implementing to find it. So we find it now, and they get into a whole different kind of conversation, the architects and the business providers, and they're able to be a much more collaborative partner in how we design strategies which are more implementable. Right. I've seen some of the questions in the chat. We have these strategies and objectives, and they just lose touch. They seem great at the start, but over time, the execution loses touch to the strategy. And that's just the nature of things when you don't have the information at hand. If you have that information at hand much earlier in the process, you're able to work on strategies that are both what you want to do with what is really achievable based on real information. Then as an architect, you get a seat much earlier in the process in that strategic planning cycle. So there are a couple of examples. So let's wrap up some of this now. I said earlier on, as an architecture team, what you want to focus on when you move into strategy to execution, have a very strong understanding of the questions you want to answer. Map that down into the kind of information you need to provide and how you get integrated into the operational processes where you do that. I've given you lots of example questions, some in this presentation. There's loads of them in our help material that's freely available on Ardoq. Lots of example questions you want to provide, whether you're an Ardoq customer or not. And then think about, how do you show the benefit of what you do? And one of those clear benefits is the very first metric I mentioned. So I mentioned that one of the Gartner benchmarks for the industry is that the companies spend about 70% of their change budget on keeping the lights on. Infrastructure changes, small improvements, small upgrades, but not actual business value changing things. So that's about 30%. And for that 30%, as we saw, you can estimate about 50% is lost because of these misalignment issues, because of people not keeping track of things over time. If you can change that 70-30 split into 60-40, 65-35, if you can change that value leakage from 50% down to 30%, that is a massive improvement for your company as a whole. And it's definitely achievable by just having a really clear focus on what are the questions we need to answer in order to make sure we're not losing this value. How do we keep promoting information and triggering information so we're not losing that connection between strategy and execution over time? And as a side benefit, it makes you as an architecture team look a lot more attractive. Just being able to show a model, being able to show a view might be very interesting to us. Not everyone else in the organization always cares. If you're able to show what we're doing and integrating into the process is saving X amount of dollars, then people take notice. And then we're used much more earlier in the process. We have much better connection to the people we want to work closely to. So I've mentioned a lot of things here. I've given you quite a high-level overview. I know I've gone very fast into some of the things we provide. There's loads of information available, introductions, introduction videos, examples of what we call the purpose, scope, and rationale, how you try and scope the strategy to execution process as a solution in your company, and therefore what purpose you're trying to solve and what are the deliverables, etc. And there's a whole bunch of example videos there as well. So feel free to have a look, feel free to get in touch, and we're happy to dig deeper with you.
Thank you, Jason, so much for that. So we are now ready for our live Q&A with Jason. We have had a colleague, Andrew, in the background helping answer a bunch of questions. But Jason, I'm going to jump right into it. There was a question that was asked by Jeff, and I think it's a good one to start with. So he asked, how do you take a strategy and drive the direction for the architects doing the solutioning? Executing a strategy seems to require rallying solutions to common architectural patterns.
Oh, that's a hard one. So we're potentially very broad. I mean, when you have a very technical strategy, if you're in an IT strategy, obviously you can tackle that alone. When you have more of a business strategy, let's give you an example from where I work, for example. So we might have a strategy to have far more focused deliverable on a particular market segment. And how do you take that? Well, you need to sit down and work with the people who owns that segment. Often you would go through a type of capability-based analysis, as you do with many other things. So you sit down with the people who own that area. You understand what is the capability changes that need to happen, and you start, for each of those, you identify what is a quantifiable variable for that. So one of those can be, okay, we need to be able to do analytics on that particular market segment. For that analytics, we can measure that in terms of we are able to answer these questions. So we can predict within X% that this particular potential customer fits within that market segment. And then we're able to work with related business partners to say, okay, what is the sub goal for this capability change? Well, it might be that once you identify that market segment in a more higher quality way, more accurate way, you talk with marketing, say, okay, we want to use that because we want to do direct marketing. So that would say, okay, they have an additional goal, which is based on that information, we're able to do more direct marketing to that market segment, which should in turn generate more potential leads for that market segment. So you're taking a strategic goal and you're breaking it down, working with your business partners to find very concrete, very specific objectives, which would then lead into the kinds of initiative ideas. And for each of these, you might come up with a bunch of different project ideas. Okay, we need to introduce certain analytics functionality that we don't have today. We can either do that quick and dirty by getting to market as fast as possible somehow, or maybe we need to do some enablement steps to improve the quality of our data, which in turn will let us solve that problem in a different way. And each of those initiatives you then take as a discussion with your teams, with the people who own the objectives. I mean, I know from practice that if you give a business partner an option between we can give you a really good solution, but it will take a year, or we can give you something quick and dirty that's only 50%, but we can get it to you next quarter, I almost always take the quick and dirty solution. But the point is you can provide different alternatives. And once you have those alternatives, you get the investment decision, either as a product aligned team, which has its own budget, or it goes through your centralized investment channel. But you're breaking down a strategy. Strategies are almost never implementable directly as they're read off the page because they're not specific enough. So you have to break them down. What does this strategy mean in terms of a business owner who has particular goals, has particular profit and loss measurements, for example? And then for each of those objectives, what is a measurable value to show that you're being successful with the initiative, and then break that down into initiatives that can be prioritized based on very good information you provide about cost, benefit, and time. And then you deliver on that. But it does take discipline to get to that level of detail.
Thanks for that, Jason. I have two more questions, and then I want to wrap it up because we are over time. But I did want to ask these two more questions. One of them I can answer, but I think for the benefit of everybody, I want to answer it live. Is there a place to read or learn more about this? So in the resources icon in the Zoom webinar, you can download the assets that Jason had showed on the previous slide, or you can email us at hello@ardoq.com and we can send them to you directly. We also have on ardoq.com under resources, we have a knowledge hub and blogs where we can post a lot of relevant materials for you. Just got another question where we're opting for a quick and dirty solution over a full-blown one. I assume you could capture the difference between the two in terms of org debt.
Yeah, exactly. So where Ardoq's able to capture different change scenarios. And actually in the webinar that was done yesterday, if you didn't attend, you can get the recording. We talk about our tech debt solution, and that technical debt solution can be applied to anything. We show you how to apply it to IT, but you could apply a debt item to organizational units, or to projects, or even objectives if that's what you wanted to do. So yeah, no worries, Paul, you could do that.
Great. And just one last question. How does Ardoq handle misalignment between strategic goals and execution?
I hope you don't mean internally inside Ardoq, because we have our challenges just like any company. But Ardoq as a product, you follow that flow between strategy and execution. You have ownership all the way through on strategies, objectives, initiatives, all need to have their own owners. And again, the goal is not often to automate being able to show that directly out of the tool. It's being able to fit into the operational process of the company. So you need to get to a point where people are doing continuous evaluations, always checking, are these objectives still, based on changes in the market, are these objectives still relevant? If objectives have changed, what does that mean for adjusting the projects? You can show that initially by showing one or two examples where things aren't happening, but then you need to affect organizational process change to implement this continuous evaluation, where you are providing the architecture information automatically triggering people at those points in time in their process to make those decisions that the alignment is falling apart.
Great. Well, I want to make sure that we respect everyone's time, including yours, Jason. So thank you so much for spending the time here with us. I know you're busy. I hope the audience found this insightful, educational. I hope if you were not able to attend the other webinars, you can email us or watch back the recordings. So please do that. And thank you so much for joining us this Friday afternoon. We're really delighted to have everyone. And please do reach out if you have any further questions. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. That was great.
Have a great weekend, everyone.